our ceremonies that we were engaged in our ceremonies. So I still practice them today. I'm very involved. That's been instilled in us. So I worked in the health sector for over 20 years. I worked in mental health, addictions, diabetes prevention and management, partnership development. And what I found was working in a system, I saw a lot of racism, a lot of folks being discriminated against because of the color of their skin, their socioeconomic status. And I saw a lot of this as a community developer and primary health facilitator. But what I was also very interested in was around policy, because often policies are created without the frontline workers being engaged, and also without consulting the people that are going to be impacted by these policies. So I left after I faced racism within the health sector. And I went back to university to complete my master's degree in political studies. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I just wanted to learn policy, but that's where I ended up being. And I found that in the political sector, in particular in the provincial sector, there wasn't Indigenous women. And the women that were being shoulder tapped were women that weren't vocal. And we needed educated First Nation, visible Indigenous women in those positions. And nobody was stepping out. I wasn't shoulder tapped. What I felt was a responsibility to my grandchildren to start utilizing my education, my experience to be that voice so that I could create space for my grandchildren and those that come behind. So entering politics wasn't my choice. I come from a long line of leaders. My great grandfather was one of the signatories to the adhesion to Treaty 4. And my grandfather, my brothers were all in leadership positions as chief and counselors. So for me, I found that that wasn't where I could best utilize my skill set at a First Nation level. Because I worked in a provincial sector, provincial system, I understood that much better. And I knew that that's where I could be best utilized. So when I entered politics, I entered it knowing that there was going to be challenges. I didn't anticipate the amount of racism that I would experience. I wasn't shoulder tapped to run. I said, I'm going to run because we need vocal, strong Indigenous women that have that education to run. And so I put my name forward. I was alone in the nomination. There was only two of us that were running, helping me in my campaign. It was very lonely. Many people felt that there was still a lot of sexism, and also that I was just an Indigenous woman. So I wasn't taken seriously. And also, but I persevered because I thought, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this so my grandchildren will have a future. And if, as women today, I thought, what is it as I can do as a grandmother today, utilizing my education, my experience, my lived experience, my professional experience to create space for those that come behind. And I thought, this is the way to go. So I entered the politics, and also I ran up against 4 other men. In the end, there was 3 of us, but I wasn't the first choice. And I almost left because of I didn't have that support. But I got in politics and ran. The campaign that I had was again another difficult journey, because now I was talking to the public to try and get to vote for me. my volunteers, who were all First Nation women, and we had a small team of 4. They faced very, very awful racism at the doors. And this is it was 2020. So I also had other campaigns stealing my volunteers. So it wasn't an easy road for me. And once I got elected, and this is what we have to do. And I say to anyone that own your power, know who you are when you're entering things like this. Also, for me, what's kept me going was my faith in the Creator, that I believed that if this is the role I have to be in, that the Creator will help me and give me the tools I need to be able to walk the journey that I'm in. So when I walked into that legislature, being the only visible First Nation woman in the legislature, I had a choice. I could be intimidated by that or stand in my truth, stand in my power. And I knew, despite what people said that I shouldn't be there, I knew that I was qualified and I had a lot of lived experience and I had a lot of professional experience. And as women, in particular as Indigenous women, for me, I wouldn't have ran if I didn't have a minimum, a master's degree in political studies. I wouldn't have ran, because I knew for me to start at that level, at that starting space, I needed to have all of this. I knew I had to work 3 times harder just to start at the same place as non-Indigenous people. So when I was there, I knew that I have every right to be here. And I had to step into that power, step into my power. But what I faced was a lot of patronizing. I faced a lot of, oh, you're just an Indian woman. You shouldn't be vocal. In fact, when I first, it's tradition in the House when a new MLA does their inaugural speech, the tradition is you don't heckle them. I was heckled. I was heckled because I talked about treaties, how we've signed treaties, our ancestors signed treaties, and how we're not even, as MLAs, not even learning about treaties. I talked about systemic racism, how it's so entrenched in our system, in our political systems. I talked about how women, Indigenous women, when they go missing or when they get murdered, we don't hear about it in the papers. We don't get the attention. I talked about the land, and everyone talks about the land acknowledgement. But yet, we're not aware as citizens how Crown land is being sold underneath our noses, and we're not saying anything. So those are things I was heckled about, but I persevered and continued on. And I found the more vocal I became about the sell-off of Crown lands, I was inundated with threats. I was, all the racist folks out there came out in full force behind the keyboard. Last year, during session in the fall, I actually had I was threatened and we had to call the police. So And last spring, my grandchildren, and this was the thing that was really sad, my little grandchildren ride their bikes home from school with their dad every day. And a Caucasian man called them little effing savages. My grandchildren shouldn't have to deal with that. Those are the things that we face today. And I was so enraged. I I thought, you can do that to me. You can do that to adult people, because we should have the skills. But when you start doing that to little kids, that's where I draw the line. I was furious. And I was interviewed and I said, no child should have to face that kind of blatant racism. So those are things that visible Indigenous people face every day. And we need to use, and I thought I will use the box that I have to start calling that out. I talked about systemic racism. What does that mean? I spoke about how systemic racism continues to be played out in our systems. I gave examples about the farmer who stole over $1 million worth of equipment over a 5-year period. And all he was given was a slap on the hand. And I compared that to Colton Boushie driving in the farmyard, and he got shot in the head. I spoke about my experience living in Regina when I was a young mom, walking around in the neighborhood, going for a walk with my baby in a stroller, and being circled around by old white men, being picked up. And how 35 years later, as an MLA, walking around in the neighborhood and still being circled by Caucasian older white men wanting to pick me up. I thought nothing's changed. And then I talked about how, and again around systemic racism, how it plays out. I spoke about and gave examples about when young women, street workers, and about when old white men pick up young prostitutes. Their names, and they get caught, their names are protected from being published because of the Privacy Act. And all they need to do is just go to John School, but their names are protected from being published. Yet those young street workers are trashed in the media. That's an example of systemic racism. I spoke about how when a mainstream individual goes missing, it's covered all across news channels in the media. But when an Indigenous person, a woman, goes missing, we don't hear about that. Here's an example. We have 5-year-old Frank Young missing since April 19th. We haven't had much media coverage. We haven't had a public outcry. I was out there last week. There's no garnering of support for the community. Municipalities aren't stepping up and saying, what can we do to help? Many people, and this is what's sad, many people go out there for photo opportunities, but they won't put out the hand to help their fellow citizens. So this is how systemic racism plays out. Another example is the duty to consult. This government has been auctioning off Crown land and leases and they've been having fire sale, selling off that, like, just they've expedited those sale since 2008. We only have 1% of Crown land left in this province. That's not a whole lot. How is First Nation and Métis people gonna exercise their inherent right to hunt, fish, gather, medicine pick, if there's no crown land left for them to exercise that on? This is what this government is doing. And when they consult, they're not consulting. They created a duty to consult framework or policy in 2010. That's 2010. It does not incorporate the TRC calls to action, and it does not incorporate UNDRIP. And how they consult the communities out there is they send registered letters or an email, and they have one-off meetings, and that's how they consult. This is not meaningful duty to consult. And then they've introduced bills in the House and passed bills that are impacting you and me. The Trespass Act that was created immediately after the Bushy case to protect the farmers is impacting all of us. Many Crown lands are adjacent to private lands. Many individuals, including myself, don't know where that border is between the Crown land and private property. If I happen to go on trying to go to the Crown land and I have to cross a private landowner, and if they're not home to give me permission to cross so that I can get to the Crown land, I run the risk of a $5,000 fine or jail. How many individuals, mainstream and not, know where those borders are? So that's a bill that was introduced. Another bill that's in the House right now is the amendment to the Highways Act. Many First Nation communities set up roadblocks going into their First Nations when COVID hit, because they wanted to keep COVID out of their communities. So they set up roadblocks. This bill that's being presented by this government is going to give them the authority to dismantle any roadblocks. So First Nation communities out there will not have a say on their lands, because many roads are municipal roads, provincial roads. And this bill will also give them the right to allow whoever they want on there to do sampling of the whatever they want to do. Basically, the Crown land, not the Crown land, so when industry wants, and this has already happened, when industry doesn't have to go and talk to the First Nation, they could just go and get ask the government to go on X community. And this happened in Turner Lake, where they do samples. And the First Nation isn't consulted. So this bill will give them the government further authority to do what they want and allow people onto the lands that they want. So I say to folks, pay attention to those bills that are being presented, because read the fine print. And I have to say, when I've been in that House, And I'm grateful for the education I have, because I was able to read those bills and say, whoa, hold on a second here. This is what's going to happen here. This is how people are going to be impacted. So when I think about the work that I do, I don't do it for myself, because by speaking up, speaking truth to power, pushing the status quo, I get a lot of pushback. I get a lot of pushback in terms of, I'm too loud, I'm too vocal, I'm too honest. And this is a system that is a very, very Eurocentric. And there's colonial policies that we're still living and operating. That duty to consult policy is very colonial. No Indigenous person, no Indigenous community was involved in that creation of that. What the government has been saying since I've been elected, when I have asked them to fix their broken duty to consult policy, they said, well, refresh it and we'll talk to folks. So that's what they've been doing, but they haven't been consulting in a meaningful way. So this spring, after the almost 2 years that I've been here as an MLA, I have focused on duty to consult. I've spoke with First Nation and Métis communities to ask them, how do you want to be consulted? I've used my experience and past work experience as a community developer, as a facilitator, to go and ask communities, how do they want to be consulted? Because the current process isn't working. I've spoken with different communities. I've also engaged legal people, lawyers that have Indigenous lawyers, constitutional lawyers, because I wanted to introduce something that I don't want to mess it up. I want to do it in a good way that is respectful of the people that are going to be impacted by any changes that are going to happen at, whether it's selling lands, crown lands, waterways, forestry, the environment. I wanted something that is there, that is respectful of those users of those lands. So we created this, I introduced this in the House. And this summer, I will be going out to communities again to talk about the difference between what I'm proposing, which is law, legislation, and a policy. Many people confuse policy and legislation. Policy is just what they want to do, but it's not legislated. And we need legislation so that this government can actually consult in a meaningful way. Every province has been given federally, at the federal level, it's legislated that there's duty to consult. But at the provincial level, it's up to the provinces how they want to do it, and they create policies or a framework that they're going to follow. But I'll tell you, and you hear from many First Nation Métis communities, they do not follow that. They do not consult the users of the land in a meaningful way. They don't. So what can you do as citizens? Write a letter. Write a letter to your MLAs, imploring them to support Bill 609, the meaningful duty to consult bill that I'm proposing. And also ask your MLAs, what are they doing to protect our kids' future, the environment, the lands that we only have 1% of Crown land left. What are they doing? What are they doing to advocate for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people that are going missing? What are they doing? And also, when it comes to systemic racism, what are they doing besides acknowledging it exists? What concrete measures are they taking? And how are they engaging those that are going to be impacted by these laws? How are they engaging them? So my work, and then I'll just quickly talk a little bit about the work that I do within the constituency that I work. So I do a lot of reaching out to in my constituency. I've been doing a lot of door knocking and just, talking to the folks in my constituency and saying, I want to be a good MLA. What are the concerns that you have? We have issues with affordability. How many people are on fixed income that can't make ends meet? How many people are working 3 jobs just to pay their rent? How many people are not able to access health services? I have a visual disability that's not visible to you guys. It's an invisible to you guys, but it's a visual disability that I have. And I have to be very careful. I actually had it will come to me, but I had to go and see my ophthalmologist. I went to Emerge because it was an emergency, but I still couldn't get in to see my ophthalmologist for 2 weeks. I am fortunate I didn't go blind. So that, I guess, a quick turnaround to go and see your ophthalmologist, that I had a torn retina. That's what I had. And because of my visual disability, I have to be extra careful. So people are aren't able to access mental health and addictions. Addictions out there is huge. The supports that we need this government to invest in our people. Many of us suffer from the trauma of our childhood trauma. So we need support services for that. So I will give some time here. I'll give some time here to ask some questions. I've kind of been all over the place here, but just, I guess the message I want to say is that I'm very honored I don't take my position for granted. I want to be a good MLA. I want to be an effective MLA. And I want to create the space so that more visible Indigenous women can be in this space, because it's not a space that is very friendly. It's very patronizing. And the racism is very, very much alive and well inside the house as well as outside. As the in opposition, we're not in government. Like in the 2 years that I've been here, I've been able to highlight the meaningful duty to consult, or the lack of duty to consult, MMIW. So this bill, somebody asked about this bill, it's called Bill 609, the Meaningful Duty to Consult Act. So I invite folks to reach out to my office, ask how you can help. And one way is writing to your MLAs to support this bill. Another is to hold your MLAs to task, hold their feet to the fire, because they sit by, backbenchers sit by and allow their cabinet to make all the decisions. So Hertha, if there's any questions, I'm delighted to take any questions.
Okay, we got one.
Hi, my name is Margaret Samuelson, and I'm just happy to hear you talk. That's very good. You've got a lot of courage, and I want to wish you more courage and keep it up, because even though you're alone, you'll make a difference. And I'm really happy that you're not giving up. It's a hard chore that you're doing, but I give you credit. And I think all the women here do the same thing too. So keep on going, keep on trucking. Love you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I just want to say that it's very heartwarming and very encouraging when I hear support, because I do have a lot of critics out there, right? I have a lot of critics out there that say, Betty, you should do this, you should do that, and you have to do this now. And so, you know, this, you're right, it's not an easy job. You have to have tough skin. And I'm getting it. I've always had tough skin. I've always been a fighter, but it's a different ball game when you're an actual, you're the only First Nation MLA there. And I just say to the members opposite, you know, keep poking the bear, keep poking Mama Bear, and she'll come out. And when she comes out, you'll regret it. And some have. So it's encouraging. And for those that know folks in Saskatoon Centre, if you have family out there, friends out there, and if they want to get involved, in order for me to keep doing what I'm doing, I do need that support, you know, and I do this not for myself. Like I often say to my colleagues, my one colleague, my Indigenous colleague who's supportive, Doyle Vermette, I say to him, like, when I'm out there, I said, I get a lot of backlash, because the more vocal I become, the more pushback I get. And I say, if I have to be that sacrificial lamb for those that come behind, I'm prepared to do that. So hearing from folks that are supportive and encouraging, it fuels me. It gives me that feeling that I'm on the right path here. I'm doing the right thing. As hard and as lonely as it is, I'm doing the right thing, because I want my granddaughter, I want my grandchildren, I want those that come behind, I want those that don't have a voice to see themselves here. And just a little bit about my own background, where I come from. I grew up in poverty. When my baby, after my first husband died, my baby and I couch surfed. We didn't have a home. So, and at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, I don't close my door. I can't close my door to the social issues. Over a month ago, my niece overdosed on drugs. Those things are very real to me. I live them every day, so I can't close my door. So I have a stake in ensuring we have voice at the table, and that we move the agenda forward, and that we have, so that my sisters, my grandchildren, my relatives know that they too can be where I'm at. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to ask you, racism is never going to go away. What would be your best advice, to people? Because I put up with some racism, but I usually just say, oh, thank you, keep up the good work or something. And I just find it surprises people so much that, I didn't pull out the tomahawk or get ignorant to other people. And if there's anything that really bugs people is when they say, well, you're nothing but an Indian, and then I say, yes, I am. I'm Cree, just owning people that just frightens them. But what would be your advice to us to deal with it politely and honestly? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. When I was doing my master's degree, I focused on, of course, duty to consult, UNDRIP, the TRC calls to action, and my project was on racism. And basically it's systemic racism and how it plays out in the employment and political sector. But when I was studying it, racism is always, that term is always evolving because it plays out in different ways. So it's hard to pinpoint that term. However, what we can do is name it when we see it. And bystanders have a power that they do not know that they have. How they could help in addressing racism is standing with those that are calling out racism, because often we stand alone when we're calling out racism, and we have bystanders that say nothing. So I encourage the bystanders, when you see racism happening and somebody's calling it out, stand with them and name it for what it is. It's uncomfortable. People are uncomfortable with it. But in order for us to start addressing racism, we have to get comfortable in that uncomfortableness. So call it out. And one of the things I believe in, but it's a long road to get to, is that organizations, institutions, individuals, we say we won't tolerate it and we create policies, but we don't enforce them. It takes courage to enforce them, and you will get backlash. But one day I hope that legislation will be in place that we can stop that. Organizations that this is what my focus was in my master's program, was how do we start penalizing people for that? Maybe one of the things we have to do when we're experiencing that, but it's a long journey, is filing a human rights complaint. But also remember, when you file a human rights complaint, again, you stand alone. You have to prove it. And that, again, it's a long, stressful process because it's never ending. So that we just have to call it out, stand with each other when we call it out, support one another, because those that are calling out racism will stand alone and they'll get backlash. And if you're going to call it out, stand in your truth, speak your truth, and know that we can't change people unless they want to be changed, unless they want change, and unless they're open to it. For me, I know there's a lot of racist folks out there. I call it out when I see it. But at the end of the day, I know that I can't change people's minds who do want to be changed. But I also know at the same time that there are people that are hoping, that want to help. And they need to understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable, and that together, and as part of reconciliation, we have to be we have to be okay muddling in that uncomfortableness and work it together, work through that together.
I got a question for you on chat. How can we have access to bills that are under consideration?
Well, for one thing, there is the I don't even know what it's called, because I just have, like, they're on when you go to the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly, they'll have bills that are being considered, and they are public. They are public, so you do have access to it. You may want to Google them. If worse comes to worse about the ones that I'm talking about, contact my office. And I'm going to give you the cell number, not the cell number, the office number to call. The ones that I'm talking about, my CA can give it to you. Okay. My CA will be able to email it to you. So if you have trouble looking for it, just call my office and he'll send it to you.
Morning, my name is Colleen Keywayton. I'm a grandmother of two, well, I have 7, but I have 2 in care. And one of the things that I see affecting is us in Regina. I'm sure there's many more across Saskatchewan, but the lack of support for grandmothers. I stumbled across this this program. I got lucky, but what about the other grandmothers? And as we stand, we suffer along with the grandchildren because there's no outreach, there's no support for the struggling mother who's become addicted to drugs. And I think that it should be more made aware that there is help out there. And like one of the places are closing here in Regina that gives out support to the struggling addict, the homeless person, you know, and they are going to be closing. So what becomes of those people? And unfortunately, my daughter is a part of that. And for me, I feel it's not being addressed. And that's where I see the racism, because I go to another grandmother's group who is put through the social ministry. And what a difference. And when I use my voice, and thank you very much, because I'm going to continue to use my voice as you're putting that in me. When I go to that group, the supervisor there that runs it, she shies away from me, because when I have a question, she doesn't know how to answer me. She tells me, I will answer your question after group. So it's just, I wanted to just bring that forward to not only are our children struggling along with the mother, but so am I along with the grandmother, because we have to live with those without going anywhere for help, and waiting, like when we should be getting counseling, when there should be more programming to make me feel better, because I worry about getting that phone call in the middle of the night, you know? And yes, I will lift up the Creator's name every day. I continue to pray, but I think that this should also be addressed to give us more hope, and especially in Regina. I mean, Saskatoon, it's there, and you know, I just give I applaud you for stepping out for First Nations people. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, thank you for bringing that up, because I wasn't aware of, as a grandmother, my oldest grandson lived with his father, and we weren't given access to him for almost 2 years. We couldn't see him. And that hurt us. that hurt us because we had no say, none whatsoever. So I hear you. I empathize with you because I was there. The racism, and I say this in the house all the time, is that the words, the sexy words that are used is the marginalized, the at risk. And the words I use is the intentionally ignored. So when there, like social services, for example, there was a program that I was asked because of my role as the First Nation Métis relations critic. Often organizations, sometimes some organizations, when they get their funding, it's under the guise of cultural support. But really at the end of the day, there isn't that cultural support there available, right? And there's some craziness, I would say, that there's, because many programs are still very much from a Eurocentric perspective. Social services, for example, is a reactive program. We're not looking at how do we invest in the people so that we're not paying more in the end. I used to run a diabetes prevention program. And the hoops that we had to go through just to get funding that was short-term funding was onerous. So I like it's like social services is not the area that my critic area is in. I focus on these three areas because one of the things what this government loves doing is that the two Indigenous MLAs before me, one of them is retired, but because they would prefer us running around doing everything and not accomplishing anything. So when I decided to be part and choose the critic areas that I wanted to do, I wanted to have 3 goals, and they're huge, and focus solely on that, because I could be doing social services, I could be doing health, but we have critics for that area. But it is a challenge. It truly is a challenge. And there's just been another cabinet shuffle with the Ministry of Social Services. I don't know. I have no answers for that. I just don't. I hear you with the struggles we face, and programs that are effective. They're not sexy enough for this government to continue funding. That's just, they're not, because this government is like, we have prairie harm reduction that hasn't been funded in Saskatoon. More programs that are available there. There's just more funding cuts are happening more and more. And that's a role. What you guys can do as citizens is hold your elected MLAs to account. Hold their feet to the fire. Inundate their offices with calls. Write emails to them. Write letters to them. But always CC the critics in those areas. So if it's with social services and you're writing a letter to the Ministry of Social Services, also CC the critic for social services, and that's Mira Conway, my colleague. So always do that, because you can write letters, you can write emails, but if you never CC the critic, your letter will get lost, in the piles, and it won't be addressed.
Okay, I got some more comments for you. Thank you for doing this meaningful work. What you're doing is brave and important. You are incredibly inspiring. Thank you. There's a question. 30% of persons with disabilities in Saskatchewan are Indigenous and First Nations don't have access to the same services as other Saskatchewan citizens. What can be done about this?
Well, as a person with a visual disability, we're on our own. That's sad. And I'm pretty vocal. I'm like, for me, it took 4 years of advocating to get what I needed. I don't know, like, because this is what I live with. And this is the situation that First Nations people face, especially if you're a treaty. You'll get shuffled back and forth, right? And nobody wants to take you on. I don't have the answers for that, because I've been advocating for myself for so long. I think about the children that go to school that have disabilities, that don't have the supports. So I do apologize. I don't have the answers. I don't. Is there something that you can think of that, like, when we work together with my philosophy has always been thinking outside the box. And I've always worked with, when I worked in the health sector, I never had a budget. I never had a big fancy title. But what I did have was relationships with folks. And we did a lot of partnership and did a lot of work together. So I don't know if that's something that we can do around people with disabilities. Talking, like, my sister-in-law she's paraplegic. So for her to get around in the city, if she wanted to go out in the fresh air, the sidewalks aren't even accessible for her. So it's really difficult, and I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. I do apologize. What we can do is write letters, CC the critics for those areas. And again, for disabilities, the critic for that again is Mira Conway.
Okay, so Susanna said barrier-free Saskatchewan is a good group to work with.
Okay.
Mira has been very supportive.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Basically, we wake up to this reality every day as Indigenous people, and maybe some non-Indigenous people actually have removed the blinders to wake up to the reality that there are two worlds going on in coexistence. The harsh reality is, I'm asking you from now on to please not say social services. It's a very gentle way of referring to them. It is the genocide factory. And we really need to, if you ask us to speak the truth, it's about reframing the context of the words they've given us to synthesize what they're actually doing to us. And right now, because I have something that I know that has happened in our community, I really, really right now need to hear something good. Partly because I already know when Camp Justice was in the park, how subversive Mo's collective is that they went and actually changed the child welfare legislation, removed family review panels, removed family review boards, which, by the way, was never enacted, which we as Piakwak had asked for like 25 years ago, and they never enacted it, partly because I don't think they really ever see us having a play in their justice system. Oh, sorry, it's their legal system. I keep on reminding myself that we'll never get justice there. So right now, Betty, because my heart is broken and I'm really just containing my human, I need to hear something good.
Well, the work, the passion, that is the passion that we need when you're talking to whatever ministry. That is the passion that you need to use. Or
I've been doing this, sorry, Betty. I've been doing this for close to 40 years. I'm broken.
I can't walk into social, and I can't walk into the genocide factory. I cannot play that game. It is called negotiating for the return of our children. And I've been doing this for close to 40 years and I'm exhausted. So and it's a reflection of the damage done, because even though Kookums are taking the babies, we don't want our daughters or our sons turned aside as well. We want them helped, but they're placing us in catch-22 situations, even with our children. And I know you don't have the social services portfolio. I know Mira does, and I know Mira can do this, but I also remember in the back of my head, we're playing politics with a lot of people's lives.
You know, as a visible First Nations woman, I've lived with and experienced racism all my life. Is it tiring? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's tiring. One of the things, I don't know, this is for me. I've lived and continue to live with racism. I do what I can to address it. That's why, for me, I got involved. This is and it is politics. Everything in our lives is about politics. And we have a government that the people in this province elected. And they don't care about us. They don't care about our daughters, our sons that are suffering out on the streets. They don't care. They're just another number. I'll give you an example. And I get emotional because all of these are personal to me. My friend, her brother hit his head. He waited 12 hours in emergency. He wasn't addressed. They didn't even give a shit about him. Pardon my language. And he left. Only a few days later, he died. And her belief, their community, and they were told, we have to do an autopsy. And she was like, no, we don't believe that. She called my office pleading to help, ask me to help. We called the coroner's office and we were told, because there's so many drug overdoses in here, your brother is a low priority. So these are things that we face every day. So do I hear your frustration, your anger, your heartbroken? Yes. That family had to they had no choice but to have her brother go through an autopsy that they were against their beliefs, but because of the time. So I hear you. So what do you want to hear? Positive? Something encouraging? You have a group that you're with. That will give you strength. I don't know what else to say.
Sakitin. That's all. I love you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you say. Because we know we're walking the same road. You're just in a different space and you can use your voice. May we hear you roar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We got a lot of thank yous, great speeches. You have my admiration and support. Thank you for your courage and endurance. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Betty. Thank you. Love you. They said. Lots of
Thank you all so much. And know that I'm not, like, I'll do my part that I could do in the best way that I can. And I'm only one person. And reach out to my office. And when I'm in Regina, please, like, ask when I'm in Regina, and I would love to come and meet with you. I don't know what I could do, but I will do what I can do within the limitations that I have to try and help.
Oh, that sounds like an awesome plan. We should get together and make a plan. Okay. If there's no more questions or comments, I'd like to thank Betty so much for joining us today. Oh, one more question over here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hello. It's not a comment. I just want to say how proud I am of you. I really am. Every time I hear of somebody like being First Nation and doing something super good, I'm so proud. I am a grandmother also, and I just want to say that I raised up 3 of my grandchildren when they were just little things. And unfortunately, one passed away from heart attack, the first one. And then I have another one that's 13. And I just want to say that I'm struggling with her financially. Good luck. I'm in a low rental house. Otherwise, we would not make it. I get my old age pension and her child tax. And her graduation is on the 13th. But thanks to the creator, we made it, we got her outfit. So that's good. And I've been trying to reach out to my First Nations, but unfortunately this little girl, she has no status and she can't get a status. The status goes as far as her mother, whom I raised up.
Yeah.
So that's, but anyway, I'm just glad that we made her graduation and, her dress, her outfit. And once again, thank you for making us proud. Thank you. Oh, my name is Janet Dufour.
Hi, Jen. I just want to say in just closing how as grandmothers and as mothers, we're the ones that keep our home fires burning. We're the ones that pass on the traditions. And it is wonderful and heartwarming to see many grandmothers here. Loving, caring, passing on their knowledge, their traditions to their grandbabies, their grandchildren, and giving them a solid foundation to live in life that is often so difficult. So I just want to say to you all, Kitchimigwech, for doing your part and being united and supporting one another, because that gives me strength, knowing that, yes, I'm in another role, but I'm also on this journey with you.
Thank you so much, Betty. Continue your fight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.